Michael was on the phone, cradling it between his shoulder and ear as he sorted through a stack of papers. "Long time no see, Mike," Tony's voice boomed from the other end, brimming with excitement. 10 years, man. It's been quite a while. I've already let Sam know. We gotta get together. Yeah, we definitely need to catch up, man. How about we grab a drink at Murphy's? You know, just like in the old times. There was a brief pause before Tony replied, his tone slightly hesitant. I haven't done that sort of thing in a long while. You know, I'm a family man now. I've got 2 kids and a wife, so I'm more up for a family dinner or something. Sam said he can come with his wife and son too, he added, the sound of kids laughing faintly audible in the background. What about you? Still flying solo, huh? Tony teased with a chuckle, a note of affection in his voice. That last question stung Michael more than he expected. Financially, he had been more successful than both Sam and Tony combined, but his personal life was a stark contrast, a series of misadventures and near misses. He was still on his own. Once he came close to changing that. A while back, he almost got engaged. He thought he really knew her, but then he found some things he wished he never did. Michael tried not to answer Tony's question. He tried to divert their conversation to the upcoming weekend get-together. Yeah, Mike, let's make it happen. I'll check with Sam and get back to you with some dates. We'll make a whole evening of it, Tony promised, his voice warm. As Michael hung up, he looked around his spacious, immaculate house, the silence settling around him like an old, familiar blanket. He knew he had much to be thankful for, yet the conversation with Tony had opened a small, aching space inside him. A space that whispered of shared meals, laughter echoing through hallways, and the warmth of a family's embrace. Maybe it was time to think about filling that space. After that devastating end to a serious relationship marked by betrayal, Michael found himself deeply wounded and reluctant to open his heart again. For a long stretch, he avoided the dating scene altogether, nursing his emotional scars in solitude. Eventually, he ventured back into the world of romance, hopeful yet cautious, only to discover that his new interest was more enamored with his wealth than with who he was as a person. This realization only deepened his resolve to keep his personal life and feelings closely guarded. As the years passed, Michael became increasingly wary of forming new relationships. He adopted a strictly professional demeanor in his interactions with women, setting clear boundaries to shield himself from potential heartache. The sting of his first love's betrayal lingered, a constant reminder of the vulnerability that came with genuine emotional connections. Moreover, Michael had no interest in casual flings or one-night stands. He believed that every person he met, no matter how briefly, held a potential place in his heart, a sentiment that made fleeting romances unappealing. As he grew more accustomed to his single lifestyle, Michael found comfort in his routine. The office became his sanctuary, a place where he could focus on his goals without the distraction of emotional entanglements. He was cautious about relationships for more than just the betrayal he experienced. He rarely talked about it, but his parents had divorced due to infidelity. Michael recalled that evening vividly. His father had come home early from work. Michael and his mother were in the kitchen when he stormed in, his face red with anger and betrayal. "What is this?" he had demanded, holding up a receipt to Michael's mother. It was a receipt for a hotel room dated the previous weekend. Michael's mother looked shocked, her face paling. "Honey, let me explain," she had stammered. "It's not what you think." But Richard was beyond listening. "How do you explain a hotel room booked under your name? Were you or were you not there with someone?" Michael's mother had tried to calm him, her hands reaching out in a placating gesture. "Yes, I was there, but it was for a work conference. There were several of us, and it was purely professional." The memory of his father's disbelief and hurt filled Michael. He didn't believe her. He thought it was all a lie. The trust was broken, and they never recovered from that night. Michael's parents separated soon after and eventually divorced. Growing up, Michael was stuck in the middle of his parents' difficult relationship. Living between two homes, he felt torn, unable to choose between his mum and dad. His father often accused his mother of being unfaithful, which hurt Michael deeply. These accusations made Michael start to doubt his mother too. His father's belief that his mother was cheating became stronger over time, affecting how Michael saw her. His mother, on the other hand, tried to defend herself, but as the years went by, she became tired and less convincing. As Michael got older, he tried to forget the pain of his parents' breakup by focusing on his own life. But when he experienced betrayal himself, it brought back all the painful feelings. One night, feeling very upset and betrayed, Michael drank a lot of alcohol. Drunk, he called his mother and said many things he had held back for years. He accused her and revealed secrets, which hurt both of them. It was a release of his feelings, but it was also harmful. The morning after was very difficult. As Michael became sober, he realized the seriousness of what he had done. He felt very sorry, but it was too late. His mother was very upset because of the harsh things he had said, and she became very quiet. They started to drift apart even more, and it was harder to talk or visit because they lived far from each other. Their talks became rare and uncomfortable, filled with silence and unspoken upset feelings. The strong connection they once had now seemed very weak. As time went on, the bond that was so important in Michael's early life began to break down, and they became distant from each other. And nowadays, Michael often found himself surrounded by certain people who took an unusually keen interest in his personal life. They seemed more concerned with whether he was seeing someone than with managing their own affairs. Over time, Michael's status as a wealthy, single and enigmatic figure had made him something of a local celebrity within his community. His friend Sam was particularly persistent on this topic. Sam had a habit of teasing Michael about his single status at every opportunity, often suggesting that settling down and starting a family was a milestone Michael had yet to achieve. These conversations were usually light-hearted, but sometimes the insistence felt more like an intrusion. During one of their regular meetups at a local cafe, Sam broached the subject again. "So, Mike, still playing the field, or is there someone special?" he asked, his eyebrows raised in mock curiosity as he sipped his coffee. Michael sighed, stirring his own drink slowly. The question was all too familiar, and frankly, becoming tiresome. "Sam, you know I'd tell you if there was someone," he replied, trying to keep the conversation light. But Sam pressed on, his tone turning serious. "Come on, man, you're not getting any younger. Don't you think it's time to find someone and settle down? It's different when you have a family, you know." Feeling cornered and somewhat annoyed by the direction of the conversation, Michael once blurted out a lie just to deflect further questions. "Actually, there is someone," he said hastily, hoping that would satisfy Sam's curiosity. Predictably, this backfired. Sam's eyes lit up. "Really? Who is she? Do I know her?" he asked eagerly, leaning forward. Michael, realizing his mistake, quickly fabricated a barrier. "No, you don't know her. And I'd rather keep it private for now," he said firmly. "When the time is right, I'll introduce her. But until then, I'd appreciate it if we could drop the subject." Sam looked slightly taken aback but nodded in understanding. "All right, Mike. I won't pry, but you better not keep this mystery woman hidden for too long," he joked. That afternoon, everyone had somehow agreed to plan a family get-together. Michael nodded along, though his mind was already swirling with the business tasks waiting for him back at the office. As they were wrapping up, Michael took care of the bill and announced that he needed to get back to work. Tony stood up. a wide smile spreading across his face. "Hey, it's great seeing you, Michael." "Looking forward to this weekend at my place?" he said with a laugh. Michael stepped into his car and immediately made a few important phone calls, trying to sort out the jumble of tasks at hand. As he drove off, a sudden realization hit him. He had actually agreed to a family gathering. Michael enjoyed spending time with friends and learning more about their families, but he didn't want to feel like the odd one out at the gathering. More so, he dreaded the barrage of personal questions that always seemed to come his way at these events. He needed to find someone to accompany him, but the question was, who could he ask to pretend to be his girlfriend? The task seemed daunting. Michael considered asking someone local, but then immediately felt it was wrong to request someone to pretend to be his girlfriend. What would he even say to her after the event was over? With a few days left until the weekend, there was just enough time to meet someone, build a convincing backstory, and ensure their story held up. He needed to move quickly. Deciding to start his search, Michael got up from his desk and began walking around the office. He paused in front of the accounting department and peered through the glass wall, scanning the room. What do I really know about these people? He wondered to himself, hoping to spot someone who might be willing to help him out. He stood outside the glass wall, peering inside like a nervous teenager. The room was filled with employees, each absorbed in their tasks. He scanned the room carefully. "Too old," he muttered, his eyes landing on Mrs. Harrison, who had been with the company since its inception. His gaze moved on. "Too naive," he thought, watching Emily, the fresh graduate who still looked like she was straight out of college. His eyes lingered on another woman who worked diligently by the window. Always alone, always focused. Jenna. He recalled her name. She was efficient, quiet, and Michael had always appreciated her work ethic. But he remembered the wedding gift that had been presented to her recently. Not an option, he sighed, moving on. Michael headed to the marketing department. Maybe Kelly? Kelly was creative and had a knack for acting during their annual office parties. But she was also notoriously unreliable, often showing up late or missing deadlines. Michael shook his head and moved on. His final hope lay with the design team. They were a quirky bunch, known for their out-of-the-box thinking. Michael entered the room, greeted with a chorus of hellos and smiles. He appreciated their energy but felt increasingly out of place with each passing minute. "Hey, boss, what brings you here?" asked Lisa, one of the senior designers. "Just checking in," Michael replied, forcing a smile. His eyes scanned the room. No one seemed quite right. By the end of the day, Michael walked back to his office, dejected and feeling a mixture of frustration and embarrassment. He couldn't believe that out of so many potential candidates, he couldn't even approach one. "I must be some kind of freak," he muttered to himself. His mind raced with thoughts of failure and self-doubt. As Michael neared his office, his gaze fell on a bucket and mop propping open his door. The sound of his shoes echoed sharply against the polished floor, causing the janitor cleaning his office to spin around abruptly. "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't expect anyone to be here. Linda told me you wouldn't be back today," she stammered, a flush creeping up her cheeks. "It's all right," Michael reassured her with a gentle smile. "I wasn't supposed to be back today either." The janitor seemed relieved but still slightly on edge. "Someone mentioned you were out for the day, so I thought it'd be a good time to deep clean here." "Please, continue," Michael said, waving a hand dismissively as he moved towards his desk. "Don't mind me. I'm just here to catch up on some work." As he settled down and powered up his laptop, Michael attempted to focus on an important email regarding a potential business partnership. Despite his intentions, his attention drifted to the janitor working quietly across the room. She was young, probably in her late 20s, with an athletic build and an attractiveness that was simple yet striking. Michael found himself trying to get a better look at her face without making it obvious that he was watching. Curiosity piqued. Michael wondered what circumstances led such a pretty and seemingly capable woman to work in janitorial services. His thoughts wandered, and soon the email before him was forgotten. The more he thought about it, the more an unconventional idea took root. What if, he thought to himself, she could be the one to help me? Pushing his laptop aside, Michael stood up and approached her, clearing his throat slightly to announce his presence. The janitor looked up, startled for a moment. "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you again," Michael began, tossing his hands up in a mock surrender. "What's your name?" She turned, a playful glint in her eyes. "My name is Kendall." Michael thrust his hand forward enthusiastically. "And I'm Michael." Kendall's smile broadened, revealing a dazzling array of perfectly aligned teeth. "Yes, sir, I know who you are," she teased, her tone light. "Oh, right, of course," Michael chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "So have you been working here long? I mean, I haven't seen you around before," he inquired, trying to recover some of his earlier poise. Kendall continued her meticulous dusting, her smile never waning. "It's been 3 months. I'm like a ninja. I sneak in during the evenings when no one's around," she quipped, giving a slight bow in mock formality. As Michael and Kendall continued their conversation in the office, Michael found himself increasingly intrigued by her. The eloquence with which she spoke hinted at a rich, well-rounded education. There was something about her demeanour that didn't quite align with the stereotype of a janitor, and before he could censor himself, he blurted out his thoughts. "You don't really seem like a janitor," Michael said, immediately regretting his choice of words. "I mean, why choose this line of work?" Kendall paused in her task, her eyes twinkling with a mixture of amusement and surprise. She chuckled softly, the sound echoing slightly in the empty hallway. "Work is work, Mr. Walker. I chose this job because it's honest, it pays, and it gives me the flexibility I need," she began, her voice steady and clear. "But tell me, why is it that a janitor's job is often viewed so negatively?" Michael felt a flush of embarrassment tint his cheeks. "I didn't mean to offend. It's just that you speak so well. You seem like you could be doing something else." Kendall smiled, not unkindly, and leaned against her cleaning cart. "Many of us have degrees and dreams. Life circumstances sometimes lead us on different paths." Her words hung in the air, and Michael felt the weight of his assumptions pressing uncomfortably against his chest. "I suppose I've been narrow-minded," Michael admitted, his voice softer now. Michael gently approached Kendall as she was finishing up her cleaning duties in the office. "Do you find your work here fulfilling?" he asked, his voice laced with genuine curiosity. Kendall paused, her hands still busy tidying up. "It's all right," she replied with a shrug. "It pays the bills and keeps my son and me afloat." Michael nodded, his mind racing with thoughts. As Kendall gathered her things to leave, Michael wrestled with his thoughts, finally deciding to make his move. "Kendall, wait a moment, please," he called out just as she reached the door. Curious, Kendall turned back. Michael stepped closer, his eyes earnest. "I have something to discuss with you. An opportunity, actually, that might interest you." Kendall raised an eyebrow, a mix of skepticism and curiosity on her face. "Oh," she prompted. Michael chuckled nervously, closing the door to ensure privacy. "Yes, it's quite a unique proposal. I hope you'll consider it." Kendall crossed her arms, her expression turning cautious. "What kind of proposal?" Seeing her apprehension, Michael hurried to clarify. "It's nothing untoward, I promise. It's actually a bit of a role-playing offer. Would you sit down so I can explain?" Kendall sat down, her curiosity piqued. Michael laid out his idea with enthusiasm, explaining how he needed someone to act as his girlfriend at a gathering. Kendall burst out laughing, the tension easing from her shoulders. Pretend to be your girlfriend? That's your big proposal? She joked, amused by the unexpected request. Michael joined in her laughter, feeling a lightness he hadn't felt in a while. Exactly. And afterwards, we can simply say we broke up. The conversation flowed smoothly from there, filled with laughter and light-hearted jokes. Eventually, Kendall's laughter faded into a thoughtful silence. She looked at Michael earnestly. "Are you serious about this?" Michael met her gaze, his expression sincere. "Absolutely, and I promise no harm will come your way." Encouraged, Kendall smiled. "Well, I was pretty good at acting back in high school. Never thought it'd come in handy." Michael grinned, relieved and grateful. "You've no idea how much this helps me, Kendall." As he reached for his checkbook, he flashed Kendall a tentative smile. "So about the payment," he began, pen poised over the crisp paper. "I was thinking of something quite generous. Let's say—" Kendall held up her hand, stopping him mid-sentence. Her expression was calm but resolute. "Michael, please. Just a day's wages. That's all I'll take." He paused, the tip of the pen hovering in midair, his brows knitting in surprise. "Kendall, that's incredibly modest. I'm offering you 5 times that amount. It's a fair exchange for the hassle." With a soft, assured laugh, Kendall shook her head. "It's really not a hassle. Consider it as me helping a friend out of a bind. I don't need extra, just what I earn in a day." Michael set the checkbook down, leaning forward with a look of admiration. "All right if you're sure, but you should at least let me buy you dinner. We can get over some details of our story by the way." Kendall's smile broadened, easing the formal air between them. "Dinner sounds lovely, Michael. Thank you." As Kendall walked home, she couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nerves about the upcoming event. The plan meant she would need to find someone to look after her son, Oliver. When she arrived home, Kendall noticed a new message on her phone from Michael. He was asking if she was free for dinner the following evening. She couldn't help but smile as she replied, affirming that she was available. Although she saw no harm in assisting her boss, she did wonder why he had chosen her, the janitor, out of all possible companions. The next evening, as they sat down for dinner, they chatted about the upcoming gathering, discussing the setting and the friends who would be attending. Michael seemed very interested in all the details. However, at one point their conversation hit a pause, and Kendall seized the moment to ask Michael a personal question. "Why is it that someone as successful and good-looking as you doesn't have a partner?" she inquired gently. Michael took a deep breath and sighed, showing a moment of vulnerability. Sensing his discomfort, Kendall quickly added, "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to." But Michael decided to open up. "You deserve to know," he said, and proceeded to share his story, which also included some touching details about his mother. As dinner was coming to an end, Michael turned the conversation towards Kendall. "I've been meaning to ask you," he began earnestly, "why do you choose to work as a janitor? I truly believe you're capable of much more." Kendall brushed off the question with a simple wave of her hand. "It's nothing special, just the way life unfolded," she replied. On her way home, Kendall pondered Michael's question more deeply. Indeed, there was a significant reason she found herself in the role of a janitor. It went all the way back to 4 years ago when she discovered she was pregnant. She and her boyfriend Jimmy had been together for 5 years and the news came as a shock. They both felt scared and unprepared for parenthood. With little time to decide their next steps, Kendall and Jimmy visited an abortion clinic. Feeling overwhelmed, Kendall decided to leave the clinic. Later that day, she went for an ultrasound. The image of the tiny life growing inside her sparked an unexpected emotional attachment. "I want to keep the baby," Kendall told Jimmy, holding the ultrasound picture. Jimmy's silence hung in the air, his disappointment palpable. Yet the decision was made. Despite her initial doubts, Kendall felt a profound connection to her unborn child, changing the course of their lives forever. Pregnancy brought a joy to Kendall that she had never known before. However, Jimmy was not happy. Tensions escalated, and they had a serious argument about the pregnancy. After that, Jimmy stopped talking to her altogether. During one of their last conversations, Jimmy had bluntly said, "I don't want the kid." Kendall was devastated. She didn't want an abortion, but she also couldn't bear the thought of losing Jimmy. She had expressed all her feelings to him, but he simply ignored her pleas. Then, one day, he just vanished. This left Kendall utterly devastated, grappling with the prospect of single motherhood. Kendall was earnestly searching for a minimum wage part-time job to sustain her until her baby was born. She was no stranger to entry-level positions, having worked several before. Despite applying to over 100 places, Kendall hadn't received a single response. Even after applying to well-known chain restaurants, she was met with silence. Her predicament was compounded by her visible pregnancy, which she suspected was the real deal-breaker for potential employers. Whenever she visited a business in person, her condition was unmistakable. Kendall's life had taken a dramatic turn with the birth of her baby boy, Oliver. The little bundle of joy, with his tiny fingers and soft, heart-melting coos, had transformed her world in the best possible way. But reality bit hard as she glanced over her finances. Her savings were dwindling fast, and with no income on the horizon, fear crept into her nights, keeping her awake as Oliver slept peacefully beside her. Determined not to let despair take hold, Kendall started her job hunt with a renewed sense of urgency. However, Kendall quickly encountered a disheartening pattern. At each job interview, as soon as it came up that she had a newborn, the demeanour of her potential employers changed. One sunny afternoon, Kendall walked into a bakery, hoping to land a position as a cashier. "Hello," she greeted the bakery owner, a middle-aged woman with flour dusted on her apron. "Hi there, what can I do for you?" the owner responded warmly. Kendall took a deep breath. "I saw your help wanted sign outside. I'm interested in the cashier position." "That's great. Do you have any previous experience?" "Yes, I've worked in retail before. I'm good with numbers and I enjoy interacting with customers." "That sounds promising," the owner said, smiling. But then her expression changed slightly as she asked, "Do you have any commitments that would affect your schedule?" Kendall hesitated, but honesty was her policy. "I have a newborn son, but I've arranged for childcare during the day. I'm really eager to work and can assure you my commitment won't waver." The owner's smile faltered. "I see. Well, it's quite hectic here, and sometimes we need staff to stay later than scheduled. I'm not sure it would be a fit with your situation." Kendall's heart sank. "I understand, thank you for your consideration," she said, trying to mask her disappointment as she left. This scenario repeated itself in various forms over the next few weeks. Each rejection chipped away at her confidence. She had to find something soon. It had been over a week since she had to leave her small rented apartment. Now, she was living in her old, beat-up Honda. One chilly morning, Kendall bundled up Oliver as best she could, her fingers trembling not just from the cold, but also from the anxiety that had started to gnaw at her. She looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror, her face drawn and eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. She drove to a middle-class neighbourhood, figuring that the chances of finding work might be higher among families who might need extra help, but couldn't afford professional services. At each house, she rehearsed her pitch. Simple, honest, desperate. "Hello, my name is Kendall. I'm currently looking for any kind of work, like cleaning or yard work, just to support my son and myself. If you need some help around the house, I'd be grateful to lend a hand for whatever you can spare." At most doors, the answer was a sympathetic no or, more often, a curt rejection. The repeated refusals were disheartening, and the suspicion in people's eyes stung. At one house, a kind-looking elderly man opened the door. Kendall repeated her pitch, her voice nearly breaking with exhaustion. The man looked her over, his gaze lingering on the car, parked by the curb where Oliver sat strapped in his car seat. "I'm sorry, young lady, but how do I know you won't just take my money and run?" Kendall's heart sank. "I understand your concern. You can watch me work, or I can leave my ID with you. I just really need to work." The man softened slightly. "I don't need any help today, but here." He handed her a $10 bill. "Get your little one something to eat." Gratefully, Kendall accepted the money, tears welling up as she thanked him. The day wore on, and the successes were few. A cleaned garage here, raked leaves there, barely enough to buy food and gas. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the neighbourhood, Kendall knocked on one last door. A woman in her 50s answered, her expression weary from what looked like a long day. Kendall gave her pitch once more, her voice hoarse. This time the woman paused, eyeing Oliver in the back seat, then Kendall's tired face. "You look like you could use more than just work," the woman said thoughtfully. She looked Kendall up and down and asked her to come in. Quietly, she guided Kendall into the kitchen and gently encouraged her to take a seat at the cosy breakfast nook. With a soft, reassuring voice, she explained that she would soon be leaving for work and needed to prepare. She invited Kendall to help herself to anything in the fridge to make a meal or a snack. Kendall hesitated, her professionalism surfacing as she explained that she was actually here on official business and felt uncomfortable accepting anything without offering something in return. The woman's face lit up with a warm, understanding smile as she responded, "I'm a manager at a local grocery store. We need someone for stocking shelves overnight. It's not much, but it's steady work, and you can start tonight if you're up for it." Kendall felt a rush of relief mixed with disbelief. "Really? Yes, I can start tonight. Thank you so much." The woman nodded. "It's not easy work, and it's late hours, but we'll work with your schedule as best as we can." Kendall thanked the woman profusely and dashed out to her car to check on Oliver, who was peacefully sleeping in the back seat. In her relief and excitement, she realized she hadn't even caught the woman's name. Rushing back, she asked, and with a grateful smile, the woman replied, "Sarah." Embraced in a heartfelt hug, Kendall inquired about the timings, to which Sarah responded that she could start at 10 p.m. Later that night, as Kendall drove to the grocery store, a fragile thread of hope began to weave through her thoughts. The job wasn't perfect, but it was a crucial lifeline. She recognized it as just the beginning of her journey to rebuild her life. For the first time in weeks, she felt a reassuring possibility that she and Oliver might just make it through. True to Sarah's word, the work was challenging, yet Kendall felt a profound sense of relief and gratitude. It was a job, after all, and it promised not only to cover her food expenses, but potentially help secure stable living quarters in the near future. That first night, after she finished her shift, Kendall gently placed her sleeping son, Oliver, in the back seat of her car. She made a makeshift bed with a soft blanket on the passenger seat, intending to catch a few hours of sleep before dawn. Just as she closed her eyes and settled in, there was a knock on her car window. Startled, she sat up to see Sarah standing outside. Kendall rolled down the window, her eyes squinting in the dim parking lot light. "Hey, Sarah, is everything okay?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. Sarah looked around nervously before speaking. "Kendall, follow my car. It's not safe to sleep here. The security doesn't allow it," she whispered urgently. Without waiting for a response, Sarah hurried back to her vehicle. Kendall, understanding that Sarah was trying to help, quickly buckled Oliver securely and followed Sarah's car through the quiet streets. They soon pulled up in front of Sarah's house. Kendall carried Oliver, who had stirred a little during the ride, and was gently rocking him back to sleep on the sidewalk when Sarah approached her. The concern was evident on Sarah's face as she spoke. "How was your shift tonight, Kendall?" "It was great, honestly. I'm just grateful to have a job," Kendall replied, managing a weary smile while continuing to soothe Oliver. Sarah's expression hardened with resolve. "Look, Kendall, you can't be sleeping in the parking lot or anywhere else outside. The streets aren't safe, especially not for someone like you with a young child. You're staying at my house tonight, no questions asked." Kendall, taken aback by the offer, was momentarily speechless. She opened her mouth to protest, but Sarah cut her off. "Don't feel uncomfortable about this. I want you to be able to take good care of your son. That's all I care about," Sarah insisted firmly, opening her front door wider. "Come on in. Let's get you both settled." Kendall's emotions were brimming at the edge as she sat heavily on the curb outside Sarah's house. Holding her young son, Oliver, tightly in her arms, the reality of her situation suddenly overwhelmed her, and tears began to stream down her cheeks. She was astounded by the kindness Sarah had shown her, a woman who had been nothing more than a stranger just last night. It felt surreal, as if Sarah were an angel sent in her hour of need. As she sobbed softly, cradling Oliver, who remained asleep despite the soft cries of his mother, Sarah approached Kendall. She sat down beside her on the cold curb, placing a comforting arm around Kendall's shaking shoulders. There was a gentle understanding in her gesture, a silent recognition of Kendall's hardship. After a few moments, both women stood up slowly. Sarah's supportive hand on Kendall's back guided her towards the warmth and light of the house. They crossed the threshold in silence, the only sound being the soft shuffle of their feet. Once inside, the house felt cozy, a stark contrast to the cold uncertainty of the outside world. They moved through a warmly lit hallway into a modest living room, where Sarah gestured for Kendall to sit on a comfortable sofa. The silence lingered between them like a delicate veil, neither wanting to disrupt the quiet comfort that had settled. Finally, Kendall, her voice still thick with emotion, turned to Sarah. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked, her eyes searching Sarah's face for clues. "Why help someone you barely know?" Sarah looked back at Kendall with a gentle smile, her eyes reflecting a mix of empathy and resolve. "I'm a mother too," she simply said, her voice soft but firm. "And no mother should have to go through the tough times alone." Kendall felt a wave of relief mixed with gratitude wash over her. Here was someone who understood, who didn't judge, who saw beyond the surface. Sarah's simple admission connected them deeper than any lengthy explanation could. In that moment, Kendall didn't just see Sarah as a co-worker or a saviour, but as a fellow mother, a friend. They sat together, the room filled with a new, unspoken bond, each finding comfort in the shared silence of understanding. As Kendall began piecing her life back together, she and her son, Oliver, settled into the comforting embrace of Sarah's home. Each day, Sarah reassured Kendall, encouraging her not to feel ashamed or uneasy about her stay. Kendall always responded with gratitude, saying that she had lived through many challenges, and this act of kindness was a blessing. Kendall threw herself into her work with unwavering dedication. Her diligence paid off, and a year and a half later, she was promoted to store manager. Proud of her progress, yet mindful of her situation, she approached Sarah one evening. "Sarah, I think it's time for Oliver and me to find our own place," she said hesitantly. Despite Sarah's generosity, Kendall felt a lingering discomfort about living rent-free under Sarah's roof. But beyond just moving out, Kendall wanted to reciprocate Sarah's kindness in a meaningful way. She knew that Sarah didn't need financial help, but over the months, Kendall had sensed a deep-seated silence in Sarah, a reticence about her own life struggles. Before the move, Kendall decided to cook a farewell dinner. By now, Oliver was toddling around, his laughter a constant joy in the household. He had grown especially fond of Sarah, who doted on him as if he were her own grandson. As they sat down to the heartfelt meal, the atmosphere was bittersweet. Kendall, gathering her courage, decided it was time to address the unspoken. "Sarah, if there's something weighing on you, something deep down, you can trust me," she ventured softly after a pause in their conversation. Sarah's smile wavered as she met Kendall's sincere gaze. After a moment, she began to share her story. Years ago, a severe misunderstanding had driven a wedge between her and her son, leading to a long estrangement. They hadn't spoken since. Kendall listened intently, her heart aching for Sarah. It became clear why Sarah had extended such kindness to her and Oliver. She saw a bit of her own lost relationship in theirs. "Where is your son now?" Kendall asked gently, hoping to understand more about Sarah's heartache and perhaps thinking of how she might help bridge the gap between mother and son. Sarah sighed, a mix of sadness and relief in her eyes as she spoke of her son, far away, possibly still harbouring the hurt from their past. This revelation cemented the bond between the two women, not just as friends, but as mothers sharing the complexities of love and loss, connected by the desire to see their children thrive. Sarah revealed that the last she heard of her son, Kevin, was that he had been managing a small furniture shop. After that, he seemed to have vanished without a trace. After their heartfelt dinner, Kendall embraced Sarah tightly, expressing her deep gratitude for all that Sarah had done for her and Oliver. "Thank you for everything, Sarah. You've been more than just a friend to us," Kendall said, her voice thick with emotion. As she walked towards her car, she turned back to look at Sarah, smiling through her tears. "I'll see you later," she promised, a statement filled with both farewell and the hope of future reunions. From the day Kendall moved out of Sarah's house, she embarked on a mission to find Sarah's estranged son, Kevin. The search felt daunting, like chasing a ghost. Every lead she followed brought her to a furniture company where Kevin was last known to work, but from there, the trail went cold. It was as if he had indeed disappeared into thin air. Determined to uncover more, Kendall took a job as a janitor at the furniture company. It was a strategic move, allowing her to be in the place where Kevin had last been seen, hoping to pick up any clues that might have been overlooked. And that's how she ended up where she was now. On the day of their planned visit to Michael's friend Tony's house, Kendall chose a simple yet elegant dress that made her feel confident and beautiful. Today she was supposed to accompany Michael to his friend Tony's house, and she wanted to make a good impression. Michael arrived at Kendall's place right on time, driving his usual unassuming car. However, the moment he saw Kendall step out of her house, he was completely taken aback. The way the sunlight played on her dress and the grace with which she moved left him speechless. For a moment he forgot to breathe, and all he could do was stare in awe. "Wow, Kendall, you look amazing," Michael managed to stammer out as she approached the car. "Thank you, Michael," Kendall replied with a shy smile, her cheeks tinting with a light blush. "Shall we?" The drive to Tony's was filled with casual chatter. Michael talked about his friends trying to prepare Kendall for the crowd. As they turned into Tony's neighbourhood, the sounds of laughter and the sweet, smoky scent of barbecue greeted them. Tony's place was alive with energy. Kids dashed across the lawn, their giggles merging with the music that floated through the air. As Michael and Kendall walked hand in hand toward the backyard, the conversations seemed to pause momentarily. Their friends, who were used to seeing Michael in a more reserved light, were visibly stunned. Never before had they seen him so vibrant, so full of life. It was as if Kendall's presence had transformed him. "Look at you, bringing the belle of the ball," Tony joked as he came over to greet them, giving Michael a friendly pat on the back. Kendall laughed, squeezing Michael's hand reassuringly. "I'm just glad to be here," she said, her eyes twinkling with mirth. The afternoon unfolded beautifully. Kendall mingled with the guests, chatting easily as if she had known them for years. Michael watched her in admiration, impressed by how naturally she played the role of his girlfriend. What struck him the most was not just her poise, but how accurately she spoke about him, recalling details he had shared during their previous meetings. She seemed genuinely interested in his life, and it made him feel deeply appreciated. As the sky painted itself with the hues of sunset, the guests gathered around a crackling fire. They shared stories and laughed over old memories. Kendall found herself cosily nestled between Michael and a new friend she had made, feeling the warmth of the fire and the joy of newfound connections. "Michael tells me you're quite the adventurer," Sam mentioned, nudging her playfully. Kendall smiled, glancing at Michael, whose expression was filled with fondness. "Well, I believe life's too short not to be," she replied, her voice soft but clear in the cool evening air. "And it's even better when you have great company." Everyone nodded in agreement, and the evening continued with more stories and shared laughter. As the fire dwindled to glowing embers, Michael and Kendall sat close, their hands intertwined, both feeling that the day had brought them closer than ever. Beatrice, Sam's wife, emerged from the house with a silver tray laden with glasses of wine. She balanced it gracefully, offering it to each guest in turn. The soft clinking of glass punctuated the chatter as everyone took a glass one by one. "Would you like a glass of wine, Kevin?" Beatrice asked, turning to Michael with a warm smile. However, her smile faltered slightly as she mistakenly called him by another name. "I mean, Michael. Sorry about that." At the mention of the name Kevin, Kendall's grip on Michael's hand tightened involuntarily, causing her hand to jerk slightly. Michael turned to look at her, concern flickering across his face. Kendall quickly composed herself, brushing off the incident as if nothing had happened. Sam, noticing the slight tension, let out a weary sigh and looked at his wife with a mixture of frustration and fondness. "Honey, how many times do I have to remind you? Mike's not Kevin anymore and hasn't been for a long time." Beatrice's cheeks flushed with a touch of embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Mike," she apologized, her voice tinged with sincerity. "It's all right," Michael responded, trying to diffuse the awkwardness that had briefly settled over the group. Despite Michael's reassurances, a palpable silence enveloped the circle around the fire. Tony, ever the joker, attempted to lighten the mood. "Remember the time the delivery guy came looking for Kevin and left scratching his head because Kevin was actually Michael?" He chuckled, hoping to spark some laughter. The joke, however, fell flat, and Tony's laughter faded into a strained silence as everyone merely looked at him. Realizing his mistake, he quickly shifted gears, trying to salvage the situation with another joke about something entirely different. Meanwhile, Kendall felt a growing unease. She discreetly let go of Michael's hand and began fidgeting with her hair, her palms damp with sweat. Though she maintained her composure outwardly, inside she was in turmoil. Seated next to her was the man she had been searching for all this time, yet he was no longer Kevin, but Michael. Why had he changed his name? As the evening continued, the lingering tension from earlier conversations still hung in the air like a delicate mist. Kendall, feeling the weight of unanswered questions and building anxiety, sought a momentary escape. She excused herself from the gathering and wandered towards a neglected corner of Tony's backyard. There, pushed aside next to an old shed, was an ancient piano. It had been moved outdoors temporarily while Tony remodelled his living room. The piano, weathered and slightly out of tune, had not lost its charm. As Kendall approached, she felt a pull towards the instrument, a reminder of simpler times. Sitting down on the rickety bench, Kendall gently ran her fingers over the keys, feeling their familiar coolness. Memories of high school flooded back. Days spent practicing with the band, her fingers dancing over similar keys, filling the room with music and laughter. Without much thought, her hands began to move, and soon the soft, melancholic tones of Beethoven's Für Elise drifted into the evening air. The music flowed effortlessly from her fingers, each note a whisper of her past. The piano, despite its age and the odd creak, sang beautifully under her touch. The melody wove through the backyard, weaving a spell of quietude over the gathered friends. As the first few notes of the familiar piece reached the ears of the others, a hush fell over the group. Conversations ceased, and all eyes turned towards the source of the unexpected concert. Michael, who had been mid-sentence, stopped abruptly, his attention captured entirely by the music. The transformation in Kendall stunned him. When Kendall finished, the last note hanging in the air, a gentle applause broke out among the group. She looked up, slightly embarrassed by the attention but pleased at the connection the music had forged. "Wow, Kendall, I had no idea you could play like that," Michael said as he approached her, his voice filled with admiration and surprise. "It's been a long time," Kendall replied, her face softening into a smile. "Music used to be a big part of my life." Michael nodded, understandingly. "It's beautiful. You should play more often," he encouraged, his words sincere. The evening's entertainment had concluded, and it was time for the guests to head their separate ways. Sam, buoyed by a few glasses of wine, was in high spirits and suggested continuing the night at a local bar. His proposal, however, was quickly met with a disapproving frown from his wife, who shook her head slightly, hinting it was time they headed home. Michael, feeling a mixture of contentment and surprise from the day's revelations, began saying his goodbyes. He hugged each of his friends warmly, expressing his gratitude for the gathering. As he did, many of them took the opportunity to commend Kendall, who had impressed everyone with her charm and unexpected musical performance. Their parting words were filled with praises and cheerful goodbyes, making Kendall blush with modesty and smile at the kind gestures. Once Michael and Kendall were settled in his car for the drive back, an air of reflection enveloped them. Michael, still amazed by Kendall's poise and hidden talents, couldn't help but express his thoughts. "Kendall, you were impeccable today, in everything. The way you handled yourself was top-notch," he said, his voice filled with admiration. Kendall, enjoying the compliment yet playful in her response, teased back, "It seems I'm not the only one with a few surprises." Michael's expressions shifted between amusement and curiosity, clearly intrigued by the layers of Kendall he was only just beginning to uncover. As they neared Kendall's home, the mood in the car turned more serious. Michael slowed the car and turned to Kendall with a sincere look. "Thank you again for everything today," he said, his tone earnest. "Is there any other way I can thank you? Anything you need?" Kendall, touched by his offer, looked thoughtful for a moment before responding. "You sure can," she said with a hint of playfulness, yet a serious undertone. "I'll let you know soon." The ambiguity of her statement hung in the air as Michael nodded, understanding that there was more to discuss and perhaps more secrets to unveil. A week had passed, and today Michael found himself seated in a cosy corner of a quaint little restaurant, eagerly awaiting her arrival. The restaurant, chosen by Kendall for its warm ambience and delightful menu, hummed with the soft chatter of other diners and the clinking of cutlery. Michael, filled with a mix of excitement and curiosity, glanced repeatedly at his watch, each tick heightening his anticipation. He wondered about the company Kendall mentioned she'd bring along. His thoughts were interrupted when he spotted her car pulling up outside. He watched as Kendall gracefully stepped out and opened the back seat door. Kendall, accompanied by her young son, Oliver, entered the restaurant. Her smile, as bright as the sunny afternoon outside, was contagious. Michael stood up as they approached, his heart beating a bit faster. "Sorry we're late, Michael," Kendall apologized, her eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief. "No worries at all," Michael beamed, turning to Oliver. "And you must be the little big man your mum always talks about." He extended his hand, which Oliver shook politely before Michael playfully ruffled his hair. The pleasantries gave way to anticipation as Michael eyed Kendall, expecting some sort of surprise. "So what's the big surprise you mentioned?" he asked, unable to hide his excitement. Kendall's smile widened. "There's somebody special who wants to see you." "Kevin," she said softly. Hearing his old name startled Michael. His joyful expression sobered as he followed Kendall's gaze, turning to see who she was looking at beyond him. There, standing a few feet away, was Sarah, his mother, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The sight of her struck a chord in Michael's heart. His initial shock melted into a profound silence as they locked eyes, each overwhelmed by the moment. The bustling restaurant seemed to fade into the background. "Kevin, I understand how you felt when you were betrayed, but your mother never cheated on your father. She loves you very much, and she's the reason I am here today," Kendall said, her voice breaking as tears began to trickle down her cheeks. Kevin and Sarah stood a few feet apart, each absorbing the weight of Kendall's words. Breaking the emotional standoff, Oliver scampered over to Kevin. "Grandma Sarah said she missed you. Do you want to give her a hug?" he chirped, tugging at her hand. With those simple words, the barriers crumbled. Kevin let out a laugh, a sound mingled with tears, and they stepped towards each other, embracing tightly. Sarah clung to her son, her tears now freely flowing. Kevin, too, was crying, the years of distance and silence dissolving in their warmth. A few steps away, Kendall watched the reunion, her eyes moist. Oliver, puzzled by the adults' emotional display, looked up at his mum. "Mummy, why are they crying?" he asked innocently. Kneeling down to his level, Kendall wiped her own tears and smiled gently. "It's because they love each other very much, Oliver," she explained, her voice soft and soothing. As the initial wave of emotions settled, Sarah and Michael sat together, their conversation a gentle stream of memories and updates, bridging the gap the years had created. That memorable day, the group gathered at Michael's spacious house, turning it into a home filled with laughter and the rich aromas of a shared dinner. As they chopped vegetables and stirred pots, the kitchen became a backdrop for stories and confessions. Kendall, while seasoning the salad, shared the story of how Sarah had given her not just a job, but a home when she needed it most. "Your mother really saved me when I was at my lowest," she told Michael, who listened intently, nodding. "In gratitude, I promised myself I'd find her son, you. But life has its twists. I ended up meeting you instead of looking for Kevin." Michael laughed, the sound rich and warm in the kitchen. "It's strange how life brings us exactly where we need to be," he said. Nearby, Oliver and Sarah were playfully arguing over how to best decorate a cake. Their laughter mingled with the clinks and clatters of the kitchen, creating a melody of familial joy. Michael pulled Kendall aside, his voice dropping to a tender whisper. "You know, you've saved me too," he confessed. "I missed my mother terribly, but I was too ashamed of my past actions to face her. You brought us back together." Kendall reached out, squeezing his hand, her eyes reflecting the sunset's glow. We're all a little broken, Michael. That's how the light gets in. The evening deepened, and Kendall found herself on the porch, wrapped in a hug with Oliver, watching the day fade into night. She felt a profound sense of completion, her heart swelling with gratitude. Recalling the moment years ago when she decided to keep her baby, she knew without a doubt that it had been the right choice. Everything had indeed come full circle. Michael joined them outside, his presence reassuring. "I'm not going to let you two go anywhere," he said with a resolve that warmed Kendall's heart. Life took a joyful turn shortly after. Michael, wanting to give Kendall opportunities to grow, offered her a position in the design department, moving her away from her janitorial duties. His proposal soon followed and they married, their lives intertwining like the vines of a robust climbing plant. Sarah and Oliver, too, formed an unbreakable bond, becoming inseparable as grandson and grandmother, their days filled with shared hobbies and endless stories. 9 months later, the household joy doubled with the arrival of a baby girl they named Charlotte. Her arrival was a celebration of new beginnings and the beauty of extended family. Through all these changes, the family lived by a simple yet profound creed: carry out a random act of kindness, with no expectation of reward, secure in the knowledge that one day someone might do the same for you. This belief, woven into their daily lives, taught them the beauty of giving and receiving grace, completing the circle of kindness that had brought them all together.